All right, this is mic one, audio test for the live stream. Mic one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Music hold ended.
Well, welcome.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our statewide telephone town hall meeting with Senator Bernie Sanders, Senator Peter Welch, and Congresswoman Becca Balint. My name is Catherine Van Haste, and I'm the State Director for Senator Sanders. Thank you all for joining this event. We are glad to have you with us today to talk about the many important issues facing our country. We received over 400 questions from Vermonters ahead of this call. We're not going to get to all of them, but we're going to take as many of your calls live as we can. I'd like to begin by inviting you to ask a live question by pressing *3 at any time to connect with a member of our team. They will take your name, your town, and your question, and then we will hear from Senator Sanders, Senator Welch, and Congresswoman Balint. We will try to get to as many questions as possible over the next hour plus. If you have questions or need assistance after this call, please call any member of our Vermont congressional delegation and we will be happy to assist you. If you are having trouble with any federal program or agency, like getting your VA benefits, dealing with Social Security, an IRS payment, or any federal agency, we have staff who are specially trained to help you navigate federal programs and cut through bureaucratic red tape. We hope you will call Senator Sanders' office at 800-339-9834, Senator Welch at 802-863-2525, or Congresswoman Balint at 802-652-2450. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce your Senator, Bernie Sanders. Welcome, Senator Sanders.
Katie, thanks very much. And let me thank everybody who is on the phone or watching this online. I don't have to tell anybody that these are enormously challenging times for this country. And that's why Senator Welch and Congresswoman Balint and I wanted to have the opportunity to chat with you and hear what's on your mind and do our best to answer the questions that you might have. In my view, and I speak only for myself, we are now dealing with a president who has very little respect for our Constitution, for the rule of law, and frankly, he lies all of the time. The immediate crisis that we worry about, and all three of us have been working hard on, is the fact that unless we can turn this about within a very short period of time, over 30,000 people in the small state of Vermont are going to see their health care premiums more than double for those who are on the Affordable Care Act. In some cases, people will see their premiums triple or even quadruple at a time when right now we pay the highest prices in the world for health care, and many Vermonters today cannot afford health care. So that's an issue that's related to the government shutdown and something that all of us have been working very hard on. Another issue that concerns me, and I think I'd love to hear people's views on it, is just literally yesterday, the President of the United States welcomed the dictator of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, into the White House with a lavish ceremony. Unfortunately, this gentleman is a murderer who has arrested thousands of people in his country and executed many hundreds. What does it mean in our struggle for democracy that the President of the United States is embracing a dictator? We have a housing crisis. We have education issues that we want to deal with. So there's a whole lot that's out there that I know that is on people's minds that we look forward to hearing from you about. Let me give the mic now over to Senator Peter Welch.
Well, Bernie, thanks so much for getting us together and giving us an opportunity to speak with Vermonters and hear from them. But, number one, there is this immediate urgency of health care. And this is on top of the One Big Beautiful Bill, so-called, which is going to take 15 million people off of health care. It's going to take $1 trillion out of our health care system. And it's going to be brutal on our community hospitals that are so essential to the well-being of Vermonters. And now, with the expiration, unless we're successful in the next few days, of the premium tax credits, businesses, farmers, individuals are going to see their premiums skyrocket. You know, some folks can go from $900 a month to $3,200 a month. It's just unsustainable. And it reflects a kind of Trump orientation that the way you cut down on healthcare expenditures is by taking people's healthcare away. So we've got to continue this fight even after the longest shutdown in the history of the country. And then the point you make about the lawlessness of the Trump administration is profoundly important. And we saw that on display last night. You mentioned about Saudi Arabia and MBS here. And when Trump was asked, or actually MBS was asked about Khashoggi, who defended him but Donald Trump? And he said, quote, "Things happen." Yeah, like a person gets murdered going to have his visa extended. So we all get it. We're hearing from Vermonters. You're incredibly appalled about the erosion of democracy, the threat on affordability, starting with health care, and we are all in. So Bernie, thanks so much for convening us.
Congresswoman Becca Balint.
Well, thank you so much, Bernie and Peter. It's an honor to serve with both of you, especially when I know that we are completely and totally aligned in our fight for healthcare for Vermonters. And obviously, I agree with everything that both these senators have said. I just want to add one piece to the healthcare piece, which is most recently was meeting with small businesses in Vermont. And one of the things that they mentioned to me is it's not just that people having their subsidies go away on the exchange is going to cause people to lose their health insurance because they can't afford those premiums. But small businesses know they're going to lose employees because that is the way in which so many employees of small businesses get their health care is through the Affordable Care Act. And they said to me, I know that my employees are gonna have to go and find jobs which have health care. And they said, I don't blame them. They need to do what they have to do to survive. But this impacts the entire economy as well as, of course, just our health and well-being. And one of the things that I have heard over and over again from Vermonters in the many town halls that I've held since the inauguration is that people are anxious. They do not know how they're going to make ends meet. They do not know how they're going to be able to afford rising housing costs, healthcare costs, and it's the instability that this administration has caused through the tariffs, through all of the disruption in the health insurance market. And so what I hear over and over again is we need some relief. We need to be able to plan for the future, and that's why it's critically important that we get an agreement for healthcare by the new year because people are trying to make those plans now. So very happy to be here to answer your calls.
Okay, before we open the lines, let me just add to what Peter and Becca said in pointing out what I think everybody in Vermont understands. We are the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people, and despite that, we are spending twice as much per capita as any other country. In other words, the current healthcare system is broken. Everybody knows it.
Right.
We do not need to defend the insurance companies or the drug companies. We need healthcare for all. Okay, Katie, if you want to open up the lines, let's do it.
Very good. Well, all three of you mentioned healthcare, and our first caller has a question about healthcare. Our first caller is Matthew from Alburg. Matthew has a question about the Republican bill that just passed and what that will mean for Vermont healthcare premiums. Matthew, you are now live on the call with your Vermont congressional delegation.
Greetings, U.S. Congress. This is Matthew LaFleur. Yes, I have a question, and Bernie Sanders, you said it right at the beginning. What does that mean for us, knowing that the Republican bill passed? What does that mean for the ACA subsidies? And since we have the highest health care premium insurance in the U.S., how can we do a workaround? Or is there an innovation way to compare these costs or make these costs more affordable to Vermonters, but nationwide, knowing that we had fortunately, the Republicans put the bill through that they want. We know that this wasn't, we know what they cut out, So is there a workaround or is there a way to make sure that these premiums stay low?
For a start,
and to the workforce in Vermont.
For what both Peter and Becca said, we are going to do our best. This is not quite a done deal yet. If I am a Republican member of Congress or a Senate, you know what? I don't want to go back to my district and explain why I am doubling premiums for many thousands of people in my state, or in fact throwing tens of thousands of people in my state off of Medicaid.
That's right.
And there are studies indicate that nationally, if you can believe it, some 50,000 people will die when you throw 15 million people off Medicaid, which is what this Republican bill has done. I think what we are going to do is do our best to work with the healthcare communities in Vermont, with the hospitals, with the medical community, to see what we can do. But the immediate task is to get an extension of these tax credits in the Affordable Care Act. My hope is you get an extension, we can then go forward and try to work out a better system for America. But right now, it would be unconscionable to simply double premiums, triple premiums, quadruple premiums for people in Vermont and all over the country.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you all. Our next question we're going to take from one of our submissions ahead of the call. We're going to stay on healthcare for a minute. Courtney from Williston asks, what is Congress doing to combat the enormous drug prices and unnecessary insurance company denials that restrict life-saving care in favor of company profits?
I can go on for 3 hours, so let one of these guys take it.
Well, you know, we've been, that's such a good question, Courtney. Healthcare cost is way too expensive. People can't afford it. Businesses can't afford it. Taxpayers can't afford it. And the drug companies, they have enriched themselves. They've made, like, they and other healthcare companies made like $2.7 trillion in the last 20 or 30 years. 2.6 trillion of that went into stock buybacks and corporate dividends. They have CEOs, many of them cases, make over $100 million a year. And they are claiming that there's no room to save. And one of the things with drug prices is we pay, in some cases, 10 times as much in the United States for the same drug that in Canada or Europe, you'd get 10%. And bottom line here is there is profiteering in the industry, and it's coming at the expense of you. It's coming at the expense of taxpayers. We have been pushing price negotiation. We have been pushing what's called reference pricing, where the proposition is that you, as a U.S. citizen, should not be paying 10 times more for the same drug that people pay in Europe. Have that same price be, we should be paying the same price as others pay. We're getting a lot of resistance, not surprising, but this is what is absolutely crucial if we're going to make healthcare affordable.
Becca?
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is there are so many parts of the healthcare system that are broken right now. We spoke earlier about the insurance companies. We're talking about healthcare, the prices of pharmaceuticals. We also have a secretary right now who is spreading misinformation and disinformation about vaccines and Tylenol and all kinds of information. I hear from Vermonters all the time, can I trust information coming from my federal government about healthcare? And unfortunately, a lot of the times we have to answer no. And that is, I can't imagine that this is where we are right now in this country.
I mean, I know sometimes I think people back home are saying, is this really
Right,
true?
how could it be this bad?
I mean,
Yeah.
It can't be true.
It's bad. I mean, we're dealing with this stuff every single day. I mean, picking up on a point that Peter made, all that we are asking, it's not a radical idea.
That's right.
I think like 20 years ago, I took people from St. Albans into Montreal.
That's right.
On a bus trip. They bought tamoxifen, which is a breast cancer drug, for 1/10 of the price. I'll never forget the expressions on these women's face. 1/10 of the price. That still exists. So all that we are talking about is nothing very radical. Is, hey, drug companies, if you're charging people in Europe and in China, in Canada, lower prices, charge us the same prices. You do that, we cut drug prices in this country in half, impacts hospitals. You talk to hospitals, a significant part of their expenditures are drugs. Very important issue. Thanks for the question, Courtney.
Right.
Great. Thank you, all three of you. We're going to stay on healthcare for at least one more question. We have a caller from St. Albans. Melissa from St. Albans has a question for the three of you about Medicare and Medicare costs. Melissa from St. Albans, you are now live on the call with your Vermont congressional delegation.
Thank you. Hello, congressional delegation, and I'm 66 years old. I'm on Social Security and Medicare. Vermont has one of the oldest populations, highest age, and I'm wondering how all of this is going to affect our Medicare premiums. We just lost we lost all our Medicare Advantage plans here in Vermont. You can't get Medicare Advantage anymore. You have to have traditional Medicare. So I'm just curious how all this is going to affect Medicare. Thank you.
Well, I should tell you, Peter and I are both members of the Finance Committee, and we had a hearing this morning on healthcare affordability. And one of the Republican witnesses was talking about the need to end traditional Medicare, which, to my mind, would be an absolute disaster. Mm-hmm. We are cognizant of the fact that Medicare Advantage programs are disappearing in Vermont. But one of the things that I think all three of us are aware of, that one of the things that these Advantage programs offer are dental, vision, and hearing coverage. And I know that in Vermont and throughout this country, you got millions of people. Elderly people literally have no teeth in their mouth, can't afford to go to a dentist, can't afford a hearing aid, can't afford a decent pair of glasses. So what we are working on, in fact, just came up in the meeting today, is the need to expand Medicare to cover dental, hearing, and vision. And let me also say, and again, I speak only for myself here, I think at the end of the day, what we need to do is what every other major country on earth does, guarantee comprehensive health care to all people. I would do it through expanding Medicare, getting rid of the premiums and the deductibles. Jump in, Peter.
Well, first of all, Bernie, I think Vermonters are where you're at. I mean, we should have universal health care. It should be health care as a matter of right, and it should be a lot less expensive. I mean, as we all know, in the U.S., we pay twice as much for health care as all of the rest of the modern industrial world. So we pay the most, get the least. We have lower outcomes, even though we have really good care at various places, but it's too expensive. But you know, your point on Medicare is really, really important. And I want to bring it back to the so-called One Beautiful Bill. All three of us were adamantly opposed to that. That added $4.5 trillion to our deficit. 4.5 trillion. And what was it used for? Essentially tax cuts for billionaires. That's a shocking, I can't even believe I'm saying that, because that's where the money went. But there's a provision that says if the Medicare trust fund gets to a certain point, then we're going to cut back on what we're doing in Medicare. So there's a real threat here that's caused by that one big beautiful bill. And this is a priority issue. And it really saddens me because, you know, whether you're a family who votes Republican or Democratic or Independent, you love your kids, you love your partner, you love your family members. You all need health care. So we should all be working on this together and achieve what other countries have been able to do. Universal health care, where you take the worry out of it, and at lower prices.
Becca?
So I just wanted to say to some folks in Vermont who may still be on Humana. Humana is the one company that is still offering Medicare Advantage in Vermont. However, what we've heard in my office is that they're having a very difficult time finding providers that are in network. So you may be able to still have Medicare Advantage, but you can't use it. And so, of course, that is absolutely maddening. If you have questions about Medicare and Medicare Advantage, please call 1-800-MEDICARE. They will take your call. They will help you troubleshoot this as best you can. But as my colleagues have said, this is an absolute nightmare to think about people who are desperately trying to get rid of Medicare when we know this is a lifeline for so many Vermonters.
All right, so let me just summarize, I think, where all three of us are at. We are spending close to, in Vermont, one of the callers earlier pointed out that we are one of the most expensive states in the country, and that's true. My guess is we're probably spending $15,000 for every man, woman, and child in Vermont for healthcare. That is an insane amount of money. And if Trump is successful, premiums are going to go up even higher while people are thrown off of their healthcare. I know I speak for both Becker and Peter when I say that just think for a moment what it would mean if people did not have to worry about healthcare costs. You know, you call if you have a fire in your house, right? You call the fire department. You're not going to go bankrupt. You have a problem, crime problem. You call the police department. In every other country on earth, people are not worrying about going bankrupt. There was a statistic I saw recently, a really insane statistic. Something like 42% of people who are diagnosed with cancer lose all of their life savings in a couple of years because cancer treatment is so expensive. People are making choices. Who gets health care? Does mom get it or does dad get it? Who's going to survive? This is the richest country in the history of the world, and that is absolutely unacceptable. So we got to put our eyes on the prize. Healthcare is a human right, and I know I speak for Becker and Peter that we're going to fight to guarantee healthcare to all people. It's a tough fight, but that is what I believe the American people want.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Congresswoman. Since Medicare Advantage did come up, and we know that Vermonters have lost access to most Medicare Advantage plans, I want to remind our callers that it is currently open season for Medicare enrollment, and Congresswoman Valent gave the phone number of 1-800-Medicare. You can also call any three of our offices to get help if you need to enroll in a new program this year or change the Medicare plan you have or change your Part D prescription drug plan. So please reach out if you need help navigating that. It is now open season, so it is a good time to make those changes and make sure that your Medicare plan is the best one for you. Our previous caller mentioned being not just a Medicare beneficiary, but also receiving Social Security. So we're going to take a move to Social Security for a minute, and we're going to take a call from Robert in Mendon. Robert in Mendon, you've got a question about Social Security. You're now live on with your Vermont congressional delegation.
Thank you for this opportunity. Earlier in the year, the president said something about tax on Social Security and also tips. I'm 77 years old. I'm still working. I've been on Social Security since I was 64, 65. So I still have to offset things, and it's just frustrating. I still pay taxes on my income to Social Security, and I'm just wondering if anything's come up since the president made those promises. Thank you.
Becker, Peter?
Well, what's come up is tax cuts for billionaires. I mean, this is really true. I mean, you can't believe it, but this tax bill that got passed gave billions of dollars in tax cuts to very, very wealthy people who they don't even know how to spend their money. I mean, you know, it's just, it's shameful for a billionaire to have only one yacht. So they get this tax cut and they can afford the second yacht. And I think all three of us are absolutely in favor of reducing taxes on working people and retired people. You know, you're working hard. You got some Social Security. Every month you're trying to figure out, can you pay your bills? And of course, that's in the face of an incredible increase in expenses. So we've got to have a change in priority where the tax system is fair to working families that acknowledge that everything they have is going into trying to pay their bills. So we really need a whole reform of what our tax system is that is tilted towards the wealthy.
Yeah, the one thing I would add is, and I think this gets lost in the discussion about the so-called big beautiful bill, which is the tax cuts that went to the very wealthy, to billionaires and big corporations. Those were made permanent, and everybody else got scraps. The no tax on tips, those other incentives that the president threw in the last minute, the initiatives that were supposed to help working people, those are temporary. So the richest people get the permanent tax breaks. Everybody else just gets temporary. And this is the contrast we want people to understand. This is not a president, although he ran on the platform of lowering costs for people and standing up for working people. That is not at all what we have seen since he was sworn in January. It's very discouraging.
One of the issues that we don't talk enough about, not here in Congress, I think in the media, is the struggles that so many seniors are experiencing right now.
Right.
I learned when I was chairman of the Health Education Labor Committee. I should have known it, but I learned 22% of seniors in America right now are trying to live on $15,000 a year or less. Can you believe that? I don't know how anybody, let alone a senior who has particular health care costs and everything, lives on $15,000 a year. Half of older workers have nothing saved for retirement, because they don't make a lot of money and they have to spend what they have to stay alive. So I think in terms of Social Security, on one hand, we are fighting those people. And let's be clear, when we talk about the attacks on Medicare, the attacks on Medicaid, there are attacks on Social Security. What's the commonality of all of that? These people, these right-wing Republicans, don't believe in the concept of government. That's right. Tax breaks for the rich is fine. But you're on your own if you're a working person, a low-income person. Good luck to you. But I think in terms of Social Security, and Peter touched on the absurdity and unfairness of our current tax system. If you're making, I believe the number is about 167 now, 167,000, you pay the same amount in Social Security taxes as somebody who's making $30 million.
The $1 trillion payday for Elon Musk.
Right. So that's it. 167,000, same amount into the trust fund as somebody making tens of millions or Elon Musk. If you lift that cap, what we can do is extend the solvency of Social Security for 75 years so the younger people don't have to worry, and significantly increase benefits. But bottom line, I think what we're all talking about in a moment of massive income and wealth inequality, where Elon Musk himself owns more wealth than the bottom 52% of American households. Yeah, that's right. I know. Yeah, check your hearing aid. That's right. One guy owns more wealth than the bottom 52% of American households. Yes, the billionaire class can start paying their fair share of taxes, and that's what all of us are trying to work toward.
Thank you all. We're going to stay on Social Security for just one more question. This was one that was submitted ahead of time, and Senator Sanders, you touched on this briefly, but Tracy asks, as retirees, we have concerns about the stability of Social Security, but not only for ourselves, we're concerned about the future of Social Security for younger people who are still working. Can you help us understand how we can keep Social Security safe for future retirees?
I mean, it's a question of who we are as a people and what our priorities are. I mean, older folks worked their whole lives. They fought in the wars. They built the economy. And you don't throw people out on the street or force them to live on peanuts, put them in nursing homes, which are grossly understaffed, not give them the benefits, threaten to cut Medicare, threaten to cut Medicaid. That is not the way a respectful society treats its elders. And as I suggested a moment ago, what legislation that I have done is not complicated. It ends the insanity and absurdity, unfairness of somebody making $10 million a year contributing the same amount into Social Security as somebody making about $167,000. Lift that up for our kids and our grandchildren who need to know that Social Security will be there. That would solve that problem. 75 years of solvency, increasing benefits for the older people today.
Yeah, it's a solvable problem.
It is a very solvable
really is.
problem.
That's exactly right. These are choices that are being made, and we need to be making better choices. Right. And it is so frustrating when I sit in the budget committee and hear from my colleagues that there's no possible way to pay for this. Of course, there is a way to pay for this. It's about the choices that we make to take care of the working people in this country and not make them suffer because we are giving more benefits to the people at the top.
And maybe, in my view, all of that ties into a corrupt campaign finance system, which ends up getting people here in Washington who see their job as to representing their wealthy campaign contributors rather than the vast majority of their constituents. Maybe we can discuss that in a bit. But, Katie?
I think we will absolutely get to that. Next, we're going to turn to housing, which is on the minds of a lot of Vermonters and on a lot of callers we have here tonight. The first call on housing that we're going to take is from Brian in Rutland. Brian in Rutland, you're live on the call for your question for our Vermont delegation about the future of HUD.
Yes, good evening. My name is Brian, and I live in Rutland. I currently live in subsidized housing, and I was interested to know the impacts of the Big Beautiful Bill on the future of HUD funding for, project-based housing, like subsidized housing, as well as housing choice vouchers. I've heard a number of different things, and I'm very concerned. I'm disabled myself. I'm certainly not able to find affordable housing. After 2 years, I heard that they're potentially going to limit that to 2 years, and I was just concerned significantly about the stability. So if you could please comment on that, I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Becca, Peter, want to jump in?
Okay. I'll tell you, the big thing that's really hurting housing right now is tariffs. Though that is adding to the already super high cost of building new housing. And the tariff policy of the president is, in my view, totally illegal. That's a tax that you're paying, and it's adding to the expenses of everything from building housing to what farmers have to pay for fertilizer that they get from Canada. But on the housing issue, we got to build more housing. And by the way, in Rutland, I saw it was really exciting. You just got another, I think, 20 to 30 new affordable units in Rutland, and there's a lot of efforts going on locally. But the focus here in, I think, Washington has to be that we provide support, that it has to be focused on not just lower income housing, folks who can't afford it, but, it's a workforce issue. It's a middle class issue. When I first came to Vermont years ago, I was making $9,000 a year. I had an apartment that cost me $135 a month. And if Peter Welch was coming to Vermont now, wanted to be a public defender, he couldn't come. She couldn't come. So this is really important. Becca? Yeah.
So you mentioned the attacks on HUD, and this is part of an attack that has been broad across the government under this administration. They have gone after HUD, they have gone after the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, they've gone after the Department of Education, they've gone after all of those parts of government that are essentially looking after the rest of us. And as Peter spoke to it, we have a terrible housing crisis in Vermont, and per capita, it's one of the worst in the country. And I know I've got two teenagers myself who say to me, Mom, don't ever sell this house in Brattleboro. I don't know how we'll ever be able to afford a house here. And it's not funny. I hear that from a lot of Vermonters, actually. And so the housing crisis in Vermont is also part of the healthcare crisis as well. We have to bring in more families. We have to make sure that we are increasing the risk pool in our insurance market. We also have to, as Peter said, how are we going to employ the people that we need to fill the tens of thousands of open jobs in Vermont without the housing? So it really is at the center of so many of the issues, which is why I know so many of us support a large federal investment in housing as part of a vision that we have to put forward after the midterms and certainly in the next administration, that we need to do this.
Let me concur with both Becca and Peter. And point, I just met a few days ago in Burlington with some leading housing advocates, and they told me something. I mean, it was really quite stunning. They estimate that something like 25% of Vermonters are spending 50% of their income in housing. And in renters, it's like 50% of people, which is, again, I don't know how people survive. Right, what do you have money to,
Yeah.
So the housing crisis is enormous, and as Becca and Peter said, it relates to everything else. We talk to municipal officials. They need to hire more police officers, more firefighters, like nurses, talk to the medical people. They can't do that. So what I think we believe in is, number one, we need to build millions and millions of low-income and affordable housing. We got 800,000 Americans who are homeless and thousands in our small state, and that is not what we should be doing. So Federal government is going to have to step up to the plate. Unfortunately, under Trump, we're moving in the wrong direction.
Can I add one thing, Bernie? The other piece that I didn't mention that I think is really important is that you also have these large equity firms and hedge funds buying up housing, and we also have AI that are having algorithmic pricing, meaning your landlord is not setting the prices, it's an algorithm which artificially drives up the price of rental costs. And I actually have a bill that is being introduced this week going after that exact problem. So we have to attack this from many different perspectives.
Katie?
Thank you all very much. And just a reminder now to all the folks on the line with us this evening that if you have a question for Senator Sanders, Senator Welch, or Congresswoman Becca Balint, you can press *3 now to ask a question. Again, that's *3 to ask a question of our Vermont congressional delegation. So we were just talking about housing. We hear a lot about housing being one of the issues that we face when it comes to bringing young families to Vermont. Our next caller is Jennifer from Springfield, who has a question exactly about how we can bring more young families into Vermont. Jennifer from Springfield, you're now live on the call.
Hi. So I'm from Springfield. I was here when I was younger, and it was a booming town.
Right.
And when I moved back, it was very, very. It was not the same town I had grown up in, and with the age population of Vermont being like a third of the employees in Vermont are going to be aging out by 2030, how are we bringing new families into this state? Like they said, I live in Springfield. Our post office just closed. The transportation is absurd. There's basically none. So how do you attract someone to move to a town when we're losing all of these life necessary programs?
Well,
Peter?
just first of all, I remember Springfield was amazing. 5,000 machine tool jobs, and it was such a vibrant community where they were really highly compensated workers who had a deer camp or they had a camp on a lake. They were able to save money for vacations, send their kids to college. A lot of times first-generation folks. All those jobs are gone, and that really was part of the deindustrialization. Getting new people in Vermont, I think that has to be within reach affordably and financially, and that's why housing, having safe and good schools, not having these healthcare premium increases that are going to be so crippling to everybody, all these things that are the basic things anybody needs in a community hospital that can, Springfield Hospital is really, really important, but it's really, really tough on the community hospitals. So all the things that we're talking about tonight, right now, and people are calling in about, they have a link in its affordability. If it's affordable, then people are going to come because we have a beautiful state with such wonderful people. So this is long term, but it's really the big challenge we face.
Becca, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, Jennifer, it's one of the things that I think about a lot as I talk to my colleagues across the aisle and across the country who also represent rural areas. This is the struggle for rural America right now. And I know one of the things that I worked on when I was in the state legislature, and I know they've continued that work, which is making sure that we have a kind of universal child care coverage in Vermont, which is very attractive to young families. I know New Mexico recently passed that. But that is the kind of program that we can be supporting with federal dollars. And so we have all talked about affordability, like it just doesn't pencil out right now. And we got to work on reducing costs, but we also have to think about what is it that gives people that foundation from which they can build a life. And I know support with childcare is a big one.
Yeah, that's a good point, Becca. It's really important. Yeah.
Well, I think there is nothing sadder to hear from folks who talk about. I was just talking to a fellow who lives, I think, in Heinsberg, who was talking about, and he grew up in Vermont, and and that most of the people he grew up with are no longer in the state. They left the state to try to get better jobs. So I think everything that Peter and Becca said is true. You can't attract young people into the state if you don't have a child care system which is of high quality and affordable. You don't have a decent school system. And mostly you need decent paying jobs. We don't want to see our young people leaving the state. Katie?
Thank you all. Speaking of young people and potentially young people leaving the state, we have some questions about education. We're going to take our next call from Shelburne. We have Louise from Shelburne, who has a question about the Department of Education. Louise from Shelburne, you're now on the call.
Hi, yes, I am retiree, but I still work in the local school, which is a public school, Shelburne Community School. I'm concerned with so many issues that are in front of us that we see happening over the past 2 years to do with education, and yet in D.C. there's a big push to dismantle, I think, entirely the Department of Education, and then that sort of compared to, well, what was called affordability and money issues, and yet this government is stated that they will give $40 billion out to is it Argentina, and I don't understand, and I also wonder how, as citizens, can we help and play a role in combating that the Department of Education would be dismantled on a national scale?
Sometimes I fear very much that people who are back home listening to this, they say, "Oh, they're beating up on Trump. This can't be that. It can't be that bad. They're being partisan. They're being really political." And I understand how people can feel that way, but it is true. What the caller just said, what Louise from Shelburne just said, is Trump decided he has a political ally in Argentina, real right-wing guy. So you're going to help bail out that economy that guy helped destroy. Not a problem, $40 billion.
With our taxpayer money.
Right. But when it comes to building affordable housing in Vermont and around the country, I guess we don't have the money that we need. So Louise, I think, education is the foundation of everything. And there was a time not so many years ago, where America, in a sense, led the world.
Right.
We had the highest percentage per capita of college graduates. Schools were very, very strong. People could afford, I know 70 years ago, believe it or not, many public colleges and universities were tuition free. Okay? And we're moving in the wrong direction. And Trump's attack on the public sector, while he meets last night with the wealthiest people in the world and the dictator of Saudi Arabia in order to help them get even richer, while they're trying to dismantle virtually every government program that there is. So these guys do not believe in the need for us to have quality education for all of our people, which is what we believe. That's how people advance in the world. I am deeply concerned that on some of these international tests, we are way behind many other countries around the world. We should have the best educational system in the world. We should be investing in making sure that young people graduating college want to become teachers because they're proud of the profession and they're making a livable salary. That is not the case right now. So a lot to be said, but let me give it to Becca or Peter. Jump in.
You want to go first,
Yeah,
Becca?
so Louise, thanks so much for calling in. This is so important to me. I was a teacher for years before I ever ran for public office, and I think so much about all of the students that I had who were on IEP plans or 504 plans, students who needed extra support in order to get an equal education. And one of the things that disturbs me deeply is that this attack on the Department of Education is going to mean there's going to be very little oversight in terms of the kinds of supports that those kids need that and deserve who are on those individualized programs. And I don't think it's hyperbole to say that the goal is to privatize education. It is to starve public education, to make it inefficient, to make it collapse under its own weight, and then point and say, you see, we can't have a public education system, so better to privatize. And we know what happens then is that a lot of kids get left behind. And I know we're going to be fighting tooth and nail on that issue. We all believe in strong public schools.
Yeah. You know, Bernie and Becca, what I've noticed, and I think you share this view, Trump came here and he recognized that there's a lot of discontent with how our institutions are functioning and meeting the needs of everyday people. And that's a legitimate concern. I share it. But what he's doing is destroying them. He's not reforming them. And you're seeing that with the education. Instead of dealing with the instruction issues and how can we better educate our kids, and there's a lot of parental frustration about the ability of their kids to learn what they need to learn, he destroys it. The same thing is happening, say, with the IRS, where instead of collecting revenues, he fires the people who answer the phone and who do the audits. The same is true in the Center for Disease Control, where you just fire everybody, and it's not so much disruption as it is destruction. So the challenge that we have is to get us focused on trying to rebuild things so that they work for everyday people. And the sadness I have about seeing what's going on here is the things we're tearing apart, like a good education system or a better and more affordable healthcare system, or a good research system to get cures for diseases. These things, when they're done right, they benefit you whether you voted for Donald Trump or you voted for Kamala Harris. It doesn't matter. These are things that American families all need. So we should be looking to find ways to improve, not destroy.
Katie?
Great. Thank you all very much. We're going to take one more question about education, this one specifically about student loans. And then we have a lot of callers with questions about democracy and the future of our democracy in this country. So before we move on to that, we're going to take a question from Rachel. Rachel is calling with a question about student loans. And I'm sorry, Rachel, I do not have your town name, but you are live with us now, and you're welcome to share that when you ask your question. Rachel, you're on with the senators and congresswomen.
Thank you all for the opportunity to speak. I'm here in Richford, and I'm calling to see what is being done to help those of us who went back to school and saw the SAVE program and income-based repayment program and the public service loan forgiveness program as ways for not only for us to advance our careers and our education, but help the communities that we're in. I just was wondering if there's any relief, like the Congresswoman said, for this, because for those of us who have our student loans in limbo and the rollbacks and affecting our credit scores again, it's quite debilitating. And we just wanted to, like those of us who are concerned, want to know if there's any relief or if there's any way you guys can give us some hope.
Why don't I give it over to the former teacher?
Well, I will say, Rachel, one of the things that I know this, I would just want to start by saying every single one of our offices is there to help Vermonters navigate these issues around student loans. I know we've gotten a lot of calls, and certainly we can't guarantee an outcome, but we can use our power, the authority within our offices to try to, as I say, grease the skids, trying to free up if you're having trouble getting information that you need. But look, this goes to the heart of it, that many people took out loans believing that on the other end of it, they would get the relief that they needed in order to not have that lodestone hanging around your neck as you start your career. And I know in talking with my friends who have been part of those programs, many of them feel like they work so hard to get an answer about when it is that they are going to get that relief, and there are not enough people available to answer those calls. And that goes to exactly what Bernie was saying. But this is something that is absolutely imperative for us, whether it is public service sector employees, whether it is doctors, whether it is nurses that have gone through this program. We are here to try to help you get that relief that you were entitled to. I'm wondering if senators, you want to add anything to that.
Well, you know, I'll just add something. Education in public service. It's so tremendous when a young person who gets an education, or a person going back to school, like you said, Rachel, decides the reason they want to do that is so they can better serve their community. It might be as a nurse, it might be as a police officer. It can be any career that's going to benefit the community. And what has happened here is that the agenda about scraping together money to pay for the tax cut for the billionaires raided healthcare. It raided lots of discretionary programs, including student loans. And then in addition to that, where it's the executive, which is the president, who has the responsibility for administering existing programs, gutted the agency so there wasn't anybody there to answer the phone. And that's where what Becca's saying is that we can help by trying to get attention paid to your case. But you know, in a good government, and one that is serving the needs of its people, you shouldn't have to go to your senator or your congresswoman. You shouldn't. You should be able to just pick up the phone and get the problem solved.
You know, I'm thinking now about a meeting I had a couple of months ago with some folks at the Department of Education who had been fired. And one of the jobs that one of the women had was precisely what Rachel was talking about. You know, sometimes student loans get very complicated. You lose your job, you're behind on your payments, blah, 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 blah. It's complicated. And that was her job.
That's right.
To help sort it out so that people's credit ratings did not get destroyed. Unfortunately, she was fired.
Terrible.
So, you know, that's where we are. Okay, Katie?
Great. Okay. Our next question, thinking about the institutions of our country, obviously one of the ones that our country has relied on for generations is organized labor. And we have a question from Peter in Montpelier about the future of organized labor. Peter in Montpelier, you're now live on the call.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call. I was just curious, like, I'm part of a labor union in Vermont, and I'm just worried with the atmosphere and the temperature around organized labor in the country, and just wondering how that's going to look in the future and what protections we can expect. And thank you very much. That's my question.
Well, Peter, first of all, thanks very much for your working with the union. I think I speak for Becca and Peter when we understand that if workers in this country are going to get a fair shake, decent wages, benefits, working conditions, unions are a very, very important part of that. And in a sense, the good news is that at a time when people perceive the unfairness of our economy right now, more and more people look favorably upon unions. More and more people want to join unions. And one of the areas that I have been working on is to, and we got it out of the committee when I was chairman of it, is pass what we call the PRO Act. Right now, if you are trying to form a union, you have an employer who can threaten you, bring you to the back room, give you anti-union rhetoric, et cetera, et cetera. That is all illegal, but employers are getting away with that.
Right.
So what we're trying to do now is pass legislation that says any employer who acts illegally in denying people the constitutional right to form a union will in fact face serious penalties. I think again in Trump, you got a president who arbitrarily, unbelievably, broke a union, the AFTRA union. Hundreds of thousands of workers who were working under a union contract suddenly lost that, fired tens and tens of thousands of federal workers illegally, can't do it, but he did it. So you got a president who I think is telling the world, or telling every employer in America, hey, you can do what you want with your workers. But we are fighting back very, I think with some success, We're seeing young Starbucks, people in Starbucks organizing in a way we've not seen before, and a lot of union organizing is taking place at the grassroots level. Peter, Becca, want to jump in on that?
Well, I agree with you. I mean, there's no question that when folks have a union, they get better wages, better working conditions, better safety. And there's no question that there's been a real effort on the part of the Trump administration to really destroy the rights that folks have to unionize. That should be up to the workers. And then it's appalling. It's really, really shocking that folks who had a contract that got arbitrarily fired by the president. He has no authority to do it, but he did it. And we're going to get into the democracy questions, I guess, in a few minutes. But that's one of the things where you have the executive totally abusing his authority. And then with us in a minority in Congress, where we have 47 votes in the Senate, not the 60 that we need, or even 51. And same thing for Becca with a tighter margin. We've got to change that.
I would also point out that you have people like Jeff Bezos, one of the wealthiest people in the world, head of Amazon, Elon Musk, trying to have the courts determine that the National Labor Relations Board, which protects workers, is unconstitutional. So they want to take away the ability of workers to get the protection that they deserve.
If I could, I agree with everything that has been said here. I just want to remind everybody that it was organized labor. It was the unions that brought us the middle class. And when organized labor was hollowed out, that's when we started to see the acceleration of this gross economic inequality in this country. And this administration is very good at dividing working people. And so it's really important that working people across this country do not take the bait and scapegoat other groups within the labor movement, within the working people. We're all working people together. They are trying to divide and conquer, so we take our eyes off of the people who are responsible for the suffering. And it's not other workers, it's the people at the top.
Katie?
Okay, thank you all. Well said. We're now going to take a question from Jen in South Hero, who has a question about democracy and keeping our democracy strong. Jen in South Hero, you are now live on the call.
Hi, thank you for taking my call, and I really appreciate that you offer these town halls and question and answer period. But I'm really concerned about people who are becoming really disenfranchised from the democratic process, and how can you as leaders and us as individuals really help to reinvigorate trust in the democratic process? What can we do to engender trust in that process? What can you do? How can we really keep that trust alive? And who can we trust? How do we know who to trust? Thank you for taking my call.
Well, that's a 6-hour question. Jen, we'll be here at 3 o'clock in the morning talking about it, because that is a very fundamental question. And it's one that I know that Peter, Becker, and I worry about a whole lot. You know, we all grew up understanding that in a democracy we have different points of view. You disagree with me, fine. You don't like me, my politics, run against me. You know, that's called democracy. We appreciate your right to dissent. You don't like the president, fine. You don't like me, fine. Whatever it may be. It's called democracy. But right now, in an unprecedented way in the modern history, or maybe in American history, I have to say this, and I know people will think it is hyperbole, I'm overstating it. You got a president who does not actually believe in democracy. Once again, the fact that he welcomed with open arms the dictator from Saudi Arabia who murdered a journalist from the Washington Post, who executes hundreds of people every year and welcomes us as a friend.
That's right.
All right? And this signal goes out all over the world that the United States now supports authoritarians, and we're turning our back on those people who are trying to defend democracy. So what do we do? Now that's the bad news. Here's the good news. The good news, Jen, is that you are certainly not alone in your concerns. I think all three of us participated just, was it a month ago or so, on No King's Day. It was unbelievable. Like 2,600 communities, and all over Vermont. I gave a speech here in Washington, small towns all over America, big cities all over America. 7 million people came out to say no kings. You know, I worked on a fighting oligarchy tour. We spoke to hundreds of thousands of people all over the country. You just had an election a couple of weeks ago. We're in a very unbelievably decisive way. Again, from small towns to New York City, from California to Maine, literally. People said, you know what, we are not happy with Trump's economic policies. We're not happy with his authoritarian direction he's taking this country. And what bothers me, and I know I speak for Peter and Becca will speak for themselves, you have people who are listening to us right now who put their lives on the line to defend American democracy. And we thank all of those veterans, men and women in the armed forces, to defend our Constitution. And the vast majority of people in this country, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, want us to maintain democracy. We all know how important it is. Do we want our kids to grow up in fear that if they read a book, somehow they're going to get in trouble because it's on somebody's no-read list? If they speak out, if they sign a petition, that makes us lesser human beings. That's what freedom is about. You know, you think I'm crazy, you think I'm wrong, fine. That's my view. Right. And in Vermont, we have had forever, the belief is you do your life, I do my life, don't bother me, I won't bother you. I believe in that. And conservatives believe in that. But we're losing that with this guy in the White House. Who wants to jump in?
Well, Jen, your question, I think, really captures the kind of emotional anxiety that so many Vermonters and so many of us feel about the collapse of norms. You know, we grew up at a time where, as Bernie was saying, you could disagree. You know, you'd be at town meeting and you'd win or lose a fight, but then that afternoon, that person that was on the other side of it was coaching your son at hockey practice. And that was an experience I had. And that collapse of norms just creates this enormous sense of instability. It's like we're walking on quicksand and uncertainty about what can make a difference. But I got to tell you something. We experience here that a lot of our Republican colleagues, like on the health care bill, where they're the people that are not going to get health care, and I ask them, why are you doing that? They're more afraid of Trump right now than they are of their own constituents. I see that starting to change. The Epstein case that you were so involved in, Becca, really was a repudiation by the Republicans of the iron grip that Trump had when he was defending this incredibly awful person. So we got to hang in. We got to help each other. And I think these rallies that Bernie's been so instrumental in, that Beck and I were at in Montpelier, were very inspiring to us. And let's hang in, because we got to get those norms back.
Yeah, and I would just add a couple of things. I agree with everything that was said here. We all care so deeply about the democracy and preserving and protecting the Constitution. And I talk to a lot of young people, partly because I have 2 high school students myself living in my house. And we talk politics a lot at the dinner table. And one of the things that I know from speaking with them is that their generation has only known chaos in politics. And that has become the norm, the expectation. Between that and between the horrific experience so many people had during the pandemic, schooling was disrupted. And obviously that was a mass trauma that people went through together, and then we just kind of moved on. And when I talk to young people in Vermont, they say, tell me why I should have confidence in democracy, because I don't see it delivering for me. I don't see that I'm going to be able to afford a house. I don't see that I'm going to be able to afford education. I think that's a really important perspective for us to hold, because you said, how do you instill confidence, or how do you rebuild trust? You said, how do you rebuild trust? Part of rebuilding trust is when we have power and control back in the halls of Congress, we need to deliver for working people. We have to deliver for young people so that they believe that government can work for them, that it can be something that you rely on. And right now they don't have that. And so it doesn't mean that they've given up hope. They want to be shown the vision, and that is our job as leaders, to both provide the vision and also give them the reminder that they have agency. It's by the people, of the people, for the people. That is the bedrock that this is all built on, and we can never take for granted that we are the ones that set the course.
Becca's point is a very important one.
Thank you all. We have time for one more question, and we're going to take a question from Noah, who lives in Georgia, Vermont. And Noah has a question for the three of you about how we stay motivated as voters right now. Noah from Georgia, you are now live with our Vermont congressional delegation.
Hi there, delegates. I've got a really tough question I have been struggling with for the better part of 20 years, and that is, all of this sounds amazing. I love all of it. I don't need to know how it's going to be paid for because we know their money is there if the proper changes are made. My question is, how do I vote blue? Like, what justification do I have when you guys had the most power that you are ever going to have in these 4 years, and these career Democrats, Chuck Schumer, the likes, a few independents, cave? I have dozens of friends that were hurt by the shutdown, but we're supporting it, and we are just betrayed. I don't know how to vote blue anymore. Give me any reason other than, if I don't, red wins.
Well, for a start, that's a good reason. You know, politics ain't easy. And as you know, I am an independent. I was an independent when I was mayor of Burlington in the House and in the Senate. And I have real concerns about where the Democratic Party is and has been. Concerns that when we had power here in the Senate, we did far, far, far too little. But what the struggle, giving up is really not an option. And to say that if you give up, by the way, and you give Republicans, right-wing Republicans, even more power, that's a total disaster. So on one hand, what we are trying to do is stop the assault of the Republican Party on the working class of this country, on the environment, on our kids, on democracy. You got to do that. And you can't withdraw from that fight. On the other hand, I don't think you've heard any of us go around and say, oh, hey, vote Democrats, they're great. They're not. Like, in my view, and I speak only for myself, Democratic Party, like the Republican Party, maybe not as much, is heavily influenced by wealthy campaign contributors. There is no reason why the Democrats should not be supporting health care for all as a human right. And getting back to Becca's point a moment ago, that people are giving up on democracy because they're not seeing results. What would happen if tomorrow everybody in this country could go to any doctor they wanted, not worried about the... People say democracy is great. I have a great government. Oh, I have affordable housing. My kid has great child care. Why wouldn't I vote? All right? So it's a chicken and egg, but giving up is not the option. So you don't have to argue with me about the failures of the Democratic Party. Peter is an iron caucus. He hears me say this every week. All right? The fight within the Democratic Party, and you know, this has to do with the shutdown, is between establishment Democrats who have a long history of too much affiliation with moneyed interests and not prepared to stand up and fight with working people. But on the other hand, I would tell you that all over this country, you're seeing something happening. You know, it's not only Mamdani in New York City. You're seeing young people in Seattle, Washington. You're seeing young people, people of color, working class people standing up and running for office and winning more and more. So giving up is not an option. What we got to do is one of two things. Either bring fundamental reforms to the Democratic Party or, as some people suggest, start a third party. But right now I am focused on bringing reform to the Democratic Party. I'm speaking only for myself. Peter Becker may have different views. Jump in, guys.
Well, giving up is not an option. And how do you maintain the desire to get up and face the day when the day yesterday was pretty bad? And every day we wake up and there's some outrages by Trump. I do think that your participation is really important in holding those of us who are in office accountable for what we do, and if there's a divergence between what we say and what we do, hold us accountable. And the challenges that we saw in the outpouring of support in these last elections, Mandani in New York, incredible. What was it? 100,000 volunteers he had. Sure. Then you had these extraordinary women in New Jersey and in Virginia win these elections. And then you had in Pennsylvania, there was like 300 local elections, and the Republicans won 17 of them. And it was a result of people really getting your view that you're talking about. We've got to do better. That translates into the politicians hearing what you're saying, hopefully. And Bernie, you play a major role pushing us in the Democratic caucus, and Becca, you do in the House as well. So we hear you, but what I'd say is that at the end of the day, all of us have to make a decision in life, no matter what the challenge is that we face. And it is, are we going to face the day and do our best, or are we going to pull the covers over our head and just deny what's going on? And that's not the choice we need to make.
So Noah, just really briefly, I understand the despair that you feel. I hear this from a lot of people. But I will say this. There are people right now, courageous people, who are standing up to tyranny. I spent time out in Chicago a few weeks ago. 19 of us from the House went out to support our colleagues in Chicago who were at ground zero for dealing with the ICE raids there. What I saw was incredible courage of these communities standing together to support each other, to push back, to hold people accountable. So I will say this to you, sometimes you have to vote because you know your vote is going to help other people. Voting Democratic will help those people who are being traumatized by ICE. Voting Democratic is going to help those trans people across this country right now who do not know where they're going to get their health care because they are being criminalized and their parents are being criminalized. And I hear that from Vermonters who come to me crying. So sometimes you have to look beyond your frustration and despair. Know that, yes, we keep pushing and pushing for better accountability and making the party more of what we want it to be. And in this moment, you need to know there are people much worse off than you that need you to help them get to a better place.
Well, let me maybe just conclude. Katie, this is the last question that we have. We're taking.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's a, sorry, Senator, go ahead.
Let me conclude on this note. Is, if I'm back home, and despite the backdrop here, we are not in the woods. We are in Washington, D.C., in the hard office building.
Yes.
All right, if I'm back home, I'm listening and I'm saying, geez, these are tough times. Well, you know what? They are tough times. And I'm not going to lie to you. We're not going to lie to you. And one of the things I think the obligation that we have as elected officials is to try to tell you the truth. And the truth is, these are the most difficult moments in my political life. I've been around for a few years. Maybe in the modern history of this country. Maybe since the Civil War. But I think, and again, I don't want to be melodramatic here, but I'm thinking that in difficult times, you just can't run away. I'm thinking, interestingly enough, in 1940, when Hitler was on the march all over Europe, the only country that was left was the UK, was England. They were surrounded. The United States had not got it. We had Pearl Harbor hadn't taken place. It was an isolationist movement. They were standing there. And, they were under enormous pressure, but they hung on. And because they hung on, the United States got involved. We turned the war around and so forth. Hitler was defeated. Things change. And sometimes things change very quickly. All right? Trump is increasingly unpopular. And it's not only Democrats and independents who worry about democracy and the attacks on the working class. A number of Republicans do as well. You got a lot of Republicans who actually believe in democracy and not authoritarianism and not oligarchy. So our job when things are tough is not to hide under the covers, But to do the best that we can, and I wish, and I know I speak for Becker and Beyond, we can tell you all the great things that we've achieved. It's hard. It is hard here, and it's hard at home. But our job is to hang on with the faith in democracy that we are going to elect people who have the guts to stand up to the oligarchs and to Trump, and in the wealthiest country in the history of the world to bring about the changes that we need to improve life for all of us, all right? We shouldn't have the highest rate of childhood poverty or senior poverty, not in the richest country on earth. So we got to get our priorities right. We have to mobilize people to stand up, fight for workers' rights, fight against oligarchy and authoritarianism. And that's what we're trying to do. So let us, we are a small state, but with a very, very proud history going back to the Revolutionary War. And let's honor that tradition. Let's continue the fight, and we're going to win this thing. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Sanders, Senator Welch, and Congresswoman Ballant. That concludes this evening's telephone town hall. We thank you for joining us and welcome you to call any of our 3 offices if you need assistance. Thank you all and have a good night.